Good. That's my objective, all right?
What is up, everybody? My name is Harry Park. I'm from the Chicago Hub. How's everybody feeling? You guys have no energy. All right, we need some music to pump up some blood into our system. So Roger, drop it on me. Everybody on their feet. All right, I thought it was completely unfair that Atlanta, every time we ask a question, they scream their butts off. So I'm gonna give every opportunity to every hub here to beat these guys and what they do best. So let's start with Boston. Boston, where you at? You guys are terrible. Canada, where you at? Atlanta, where you at? New York, where you at? Chicago, where you at? Who am I forgetting? Dallas, San Francisco, where you at? Dallas, where you at? Did I forget anybody? DC, where you at? Alright, let's give it one more time. Atlanta's in the lead. We're gonna start with them. Atlanta, where you at? Boston, where are you at? Boston's trash. Canada, let me hear you. Chicago. Who am I forgetting? Dallas, where you at? We're just gonna do a wave. Let's start with wave right now. Give me a wave. 1, 2, 3. He is based from Spearville, Georgia. He's from the Atlanta office. He is our inspirational speaker tonight. His hobby includes Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, mixed martial arts, stand-up comedy, and he makes music. He is our inspirational speaker. Everybody give me a hand for Isaac Chung!
I don't even need to go up now. I just go home without paying. How is everybody doing? Thank you very much for your time today. Again, my name is Isaac Chung. I'll be your motivational speaker. Today I'm here to just tell you 3 stories about my life. Nothing too crazy. But first I want to say shout out to my ATL squad. And I'm also from DC, Maryland, so DMV. Anybody? Represent. And special shout out to Nick and Haji. Thank you for everything. Really appreciate it. I want to talk about today 3 stories. First story is finding your silver lining. The second story is training your peace. And the final part is face your suffering. If I just knew how to work this. Is it working? So, this story starts out, when I was a kid, I moved around a lot. I had poor, Korean immigrant parents who moved to this country and moved every 2 years or so. So by the time, before I even got to high school, I'd been to 5 different schools, which wasn't all bad. You know, I got to expand my horizons, got to see new cities, explore diverse new cultures, and make a bunch of new friends that all ended up kicking my ass. You ever been so scared going to the water fountain that you looked like a gazelle on Animal Planet? Watch as this rare species of Korean gazelle walks over to the riverbed under a hot summer sun. He dips his head down for a cool drink. Suddenly, he senses danger in the distance. Fearing for his life, he gallops into the distance. In my head, that's how gazelles gallop. And I could never really get enough water. So I'd go home, I'd go back to class all dehydrated, lips all crusty. My teacher would be like, oh, Isaac, what's wrong, baby? You look sick. Oh, Miss Kincaid, it's been 2 days since I've had some water. And why is it that there's no security guards in the hallways? Kids are crazy. Look, if I don't make it, give my Ninja Turtles to Kevin. I got to middle school, same thing, just bigger, badder bullies. So I kept trying to find unique ways to get out of beatdowns. So at that time, I was trained in traditional Chinese martial arts. Now, if you're not familiar with what that is, traditional Chinese martial arts in the streets is as effective as ballet. Made it worse, man. You can't be like, hey, what's up, man? I'm like, nobody has time for all this. Hold up. Nobody got time for that. But I always try to act tough, though. Because they'll come and be like, hey, Isaac, where's my lunch money, man? And I go, you talking to me? Big mistake, buddy. You have offended my family. And you have offended the Shaolin. I did everything. I even danced like Michael Jackson. When I was in high school, I got up on the cafeteria table and did the whole Billie Jean routine, hoping that this would be a preemptive method of getting these bullies off my tail. So I get to high school and I do this. And everybody's like, and the whole cafeteria's like, Isaac! Isaac! And I'm like, I'm the baddest man up in here. Come down and go straight to the principal's office. At this time, my mom was dealing with cancer, breast cancer. But she gave me the worst butt whooping I've ever had in my life. I was like, I thought the chemo took your strength. Stuff made you a mutant. That's what they call Professor Xavier. Figure that out from here. All this craziness. You know what? I just kept dancing, kept singing my whole life. I was working odd jobs in Korea, traveling the cities of China, just always dancing. I used to battle dance in clubs for bottles of whiskey. It's crazy. I had no idea. It wasn't because I had some purpose or plan. I just liked doing it. And for sure, I had no idea how it would affect my professional career until I met Adam Massarelli at IBM. You guys had the pleasure of hearing from him yesterday. Let's give him. So when I was in your shoes 2.5 years ago, he calls me up on stage. He's like, hey, Isaac, now why don't you sing that song you sing, The Way You Make Me Feel by Michael Jackson? So I sang it. And after that, I just kept doing stuff for IBM. And gradually it got to the point where, towards the end of my first job as a client rep, I did this. And up here to see we go to residence and I will recognize. I began bringing the keys so high. Big blue, stay true to clientele. And we don't stop. Digital sales never fail. See Arenas 2018 celebrate. Digital sales right at the point you wanna play. Mental state is fixated on the line. I began rising again so high. So high, so high, so high, so high. Baby now, so high. Did I? Did I get Did my job responsibility to enhance? No. But the office paid money for me to go into a studio, write down some lyrics for a promotion for our own office as a digital sales organization across the country. And I got to achieve I've always wanted to kind of sit in the booth and lay down the track, and I got to do it. And I never thought I'd do it on IBM's dime and IBM's time. So fast forward to now, I hadn't stopped, and I think what I noticed is I get to come up here in front of you guys, make a fool of myself, and I'm having fun doing it. And I couldn't be more grateful for all those times as a kid getting my butt whooped. Because at the time, they were all pretty intense experiences, getting bullied all the time as a kid. That, if you asked me, and they came up to me and said, "Hey, Isaac, you know what, just give me the $5. I would be like, "Oh, no problem. You want the chicken nuggets? I can just get it for you now." But they never came like that. They just came and be like, "Ah!" And I'd be like, just take it. That was always, they never came and asked nicely. They would all bum rush me. Looking back now, it opened up. I realized those pretty crazy experiences running around with the kids from the block, it helped me develop a few appreciations. One, it helped me find myself and help shape who I am as a human being. I love singing and dancing. It was forged in the fires of fists. The other part of it was all those neighborhoods I used to grow up in gave me a deep connection to child advocacy. So when I was in law school, I worked as a juvenile defender and as a child advocate. So my kids were all the at-risk youth in Atlanta. So if you go up to them, they have cuts on their arms. They're 14-year-old kids that just got out the streets. They're all suicidal, abused since they were children. Kids that were up in lockdown because they grew up in hellish neighborhoods and they had nowhere to go. And my job, while all my friends worked at fancy firms, was to go represent their interests. And it was the most therapeutic experience of my life up until that point. I would have never had that connection had I not had those experiences as a kid. So what I noticed learned was, in hindsight, there's an important lesson, was find your silver lining. And what that is basically reframe your painful past, your struggles and your trials and tribulations in a way that empowers you. It must be rooted in the truth. You're not making things up out of thin air. But if you're truthfully reframing things in a light that's empowering, it actually spurs your evolution and it boosts and enhances your ability to be resilient. How do you last through the tough times? What do you do? When things are dark, I'm sure all of you experience this, your mind will keep going towards that vicious cycle of, oh my God, this is so horrific. And so what you do is you take a step back, take a breath, and then reframe things one piece by piece, until you develop this fortress of identity and reality that almost reinforces your existence to say, I've been past this, I've been through worse, or I've been through similarly tough things, and I can get through it again. And when you're able to do that over and over, the net result of it is that it benefits the people you care about, because nothing hurts more for people that you love than seeing you suffer. So find your silver lining. The next story that I have is train for your peace. And this story starts with my little baby sister. Her name is Shia. You wouldn't be able to know from her angelic face, but we adopted her when she was 3 months old, malnourished, dying, on the brink of destruction. We adopted her from a family that had neglected her to the extent where they put an ad out in the newspaper. This kid's dying, somebody save her. So my family swooped in, brought her in, and painstakingly nursed her back to health until she was this happy, go-lucky baby. My favorite part of her was her cute little toes, her cute little cheeks. I would kiss her cheeks so much that by the time she was a toddler, every time I'd walk in the room, I'd say, "Hey, she'd be like, "Oh no!" Yeah, but she was through her birth, my identity was forever intertwined as this the big brother, her protector, and I didn't know who I was outside of her existence. One of the things I used to do was she obsessed with Cinderella, right? So, all this, when you're a kid in the scary parts of Disney movies, you want somebody to be there for you, which meant I had to sit and watch this movie 50 times a day, which isn't that great for somebody that's trying to build some street cred, you know what I'm saying? Well, I'd sing all the songs to her, oh, this is love, oh, this, and I'd waltz her through the rooms when she had panic attacks. She had so much trauma at such a young age, she didn't know how to operate. So if somebody she didn't know walked into the house, her immediate biological reaction was death. So she'd freak out, and I'd have to pick her up, and I'd start dancing, start singing, help her calm down. And she would start giggling again, and that was our relationship. We depended on each other for survival. So when she was 5 and I was 18, our family decided to go on our first family trip. We went to Korea, and her and I were in a countryside touring, 7 a.m., warm August. I'm in the back seat, and as always, there were a couple of strangers in the car that she didn't know. So she sits on my lap and curls into a ball and passes out. So we both fall asleep into this back car. Driving down this road, eventually, as fate would have it, the right brake locks up and careens the car going like 70 miles an hour into a large concrete pole. Instantly, the passenger dies. The driver is mangled, and her and I fly out of the window, me holding her like this. I go face first into the concrete. I smashed my head in, smashed my orbital bone, smashed my nose, smashed all of my teeth. They were barely hanging on by a thread. My jaw completely broke, so it was hanging. Tore the bones, the ligaments in my shoulders and my knees, and because she was so young, she died on impact. I get up from the wreckage, I pick her body up, and I start on 18. And I don't remember, it's a lot of haze, but there's eyewitnesses that said my gut instinct was to get up from the wreckage, blood everywhere, dead bodies everywhere, to pick her up and run through the fields, screaming for help. And there's no one there. And I'm, losing blood, so I'm about to pass over, and an army truck just happens to come by, put us in the back, and drive us to the hospital. It's there I fall into a coma, and they were wondering whether or not I was going to survive. I'll wake up a week later, completely confined to a bed, wasn't able to move. And the next 2 months I was stuck in 2 ICU units, unable to walk, unable to chew. My head was bound shut to try to piece my broken face and teeth back together. I had to subsist completely on a liquid diet. So I know what starving for 2 months is like. You start hallucinating about food. So for example, I don't have any art skill, meaning I can't draw, I can't sketch with crap. But during that time, I have sketch work about food that I did. I went from having no skill to Picasso, man. I drew a hamburger, you could see the juice on the bun. I was like, I'm so detailed. So that survival, it inspired a little bit of creativity in me. So after 2 months, I get out, and then I find out about my sister. So I was in such a state of shock and fragility of body and mind that they didn't tell me because they thought I wouldn't make it. So I get back, and that's when my real hell started, because the only thing that kept me alive was, I asked them, hey, where's she? They're like, she's fine. She's waiting for you at home. Get well soon. And that was my one, okay, that's good. I don't care if I have mind or body, as long as she's alive. I can just work to support her dreams. And then when I got back, it was like, you're reborn again, but it's just a dark void. And I was 18. Before this, I was a lifelong martial artist. I was all ripped and thought I was cool, and I danced and all this stuff. Meant nothing. Meant absolutely nothing. So I started my personal, deep, psychological, existential crisis at 18. The stuff that I thought about then is stuff that when I talked to my grandparents, they started thinking about at 70. So I wasn't able to adjust. I couldn't really apply to colleges at the time. So my solution, inspired by a few people in my family, was I went off to the mountains of Korea. And I joined this mountain training program for 2 years. So I had all the, if you've seen enough of Kung Fu movies, you wake up 4 in the morning and you hike up tall mountain peaks and train 8 hours a day, and I'm punching bamboo and eating dumplings like a homeless person. I was the real Kung Fu Panda, man, the real one. In all this serenity, I was dealing, you would think, oh wow, it's so beautiful, it's so calm. I was dealing with this really intense polar dynamic of being in a physical, Zen environment, but internally so destroyed, and having the crippling burden of survivor's guilt. If you listen to a lot of soldiers who come back from battle who have PTSD, a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times what triggered the PTSD was the loss of someone else they couldn't save. And you replay it back over and over again. I was dealing with this at 18 in the mountains. But in hindsight, what I learned in the mountains, which I wasn't really able to actualize and put it into my life until a couple of years ago, was this concept of training for your peace. Now, what that means is, a lot of us spend so much energy trying to avoid the chaos. When things go bad, we spend so much energy reacting to that chaos. And the reality is, life itself is chaos. And your ability to be resilient and evolve is how quickly can you recognize it, accept it, embrace it, and adapt to it. So, your ability to adapt to it has everything to do with how much training you've done to build those skill sets of adaptation. And that's what the mountains taught me. You are only as good as your training. So, there's this quote, we would walk, this is some of the scenery, this is not the exact picture, but it's very similar to what I got to see every morning. We would get up, and when you go up this mountain, you're dealing with so much physical intensity and rigor, and it's dark, it's 4 a.m., and you're literally left with your thoughts going up this mountain, and you're hating it, you have no idea why you're here, you miss your family, you're hungry, you want to go back to sleep, you're cursing everything, and then you get up, and boom, you see this. And there's this expansion of majestic nature. And in a moment, you recognize the kind of microscopic, minuscule existence that you have to the relativity of everything. And that's a good thing, because so much of the suffering that we have is exacerbated by our sense of ego, by my pride, right? I am this, I gotta be somebody. And then you realize you ain't nothing. But that nothing alleviates some of the pressure, and then you can just be. And a lot of that training was to get as close as you can to that present. To just go through life and be as attentive to your growth, be as attentive to your evolution and the things that you can control. And the rest of the, people that have meditated before, the rest of it is just letting stuff go, right? So what my trick is that I learned from the mountains, and I read a quote by Charles Wendell, and he says, "I am convinced that life is 10% of what happens to me and 90% of how I react to it." My kind of extrapolation from that is focus. In life, my career advice, not whether you pick servers or security, I kind of listen to security, but it's focus all of 90% of your energy on what you have control over. That's basically you. You don't have a lot of things you have control over outside of yourself. So focus on your habits. Sleep better, eat better, love better. Be more connected with people. Be understanding of others. And be strict with who you are as a human being, more accepting of other people's externally. And then with the remaining 10%, all the stuff that happens to you. Lay off. Somebody's sick. You address it as much as possible, and you spend a lot of the rest of the energy letting go of things you can't control, that are outside of control. And you keep moving, and you keep evolving. And that's how you stay afloat. And we learn that in martial arts is your ability, right? So if we associate love with effectiveness, right? You might have the intent of love. Oh, I love you, right? It's easy to say. But how do you actually love, right? So same thing in martial arts. My ability to save someone's life that I care about or protect someone has everything to do with how much time I put outside of that confrontation and train. And it's a lonely road. Sometimes you want to stop. But as much as I put in there, when it actually happens, there's no time to think. Your opponent's not going to wait for you to get ready. You know what I mean? That's what I realized is the mountains taught me, train your peace. Realize that peace is not the removal of chaos, but your ability to find peace within it. And the only way you find it within it is to train until the peace doesn't disturb you. And guess what happens after that? You graduate. And then a new chaos comes, a new burden, and it's a greater burden. And you might be able to start taking other people's burden on your shoulders. And that's what a leader is. They're able to take on more responsibility than the next. As opposed to a child who, the smallest disturbance in the forest, they start crying. Train your peace. I should have brought water up here. The next one is face your suffering. And, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Face your suffering. The concept of it is, excuse me, it's kind of connected to stuff I learned in the mountains so after the mountains, I had learned all these concepts. They were not yet ingrained and really connected to who I was. I was only 21, still a kid. So I just left the mountains and went into the Seoul, the capital of Korea, and I picked up manual labor. So I bussed tables, I laid brick, I cleaned trash up, waited tables, I cleaned after people, cleaned up shoes, whatever you would do the lowest menial job, I've done almost all of them. And the last year that I was in Korea 3 years after the mountains. I slept on the floor. And some of the memories that I had was in the winter in Korea, like if you heat the floor, all the cockroaches from the kitchen would come into my room. And there's countless times where I woke up, 22 years old, thousands away from anything that I knew or held dear, and I'd wake up with a cockroach in my room. And I'd wake up and I'm sitting there like, wow, this is what my life is. I'm utterly alone. There's nothing here for me. And from there, I just kind of became this wanderer, right? Trying to pick up one experience to the next. But what I did know was that everybody is born with a set of strengths and weaknesses. Because of the accident, my weaknesses had metastasized to such a exponentially massive extent that if I did not address them on a daily basis, it would kill me and it would cripple me. That's just the reality that I had. You either do that, I had that due to that car accident, but you eventually have to do it when you're old enough, where your body's gone, your health is gone. When you're 80, all you remember is all the messed up stuff that you possibly done to people, all the mistakes that you made, the regrets that you have of not living a more fulfilling life, not loving enough. Those are the regrets that you have. I was dealing with that at 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. I just didn't know how to deal with it. So I just kept traveling, and I would have one goal at a time. Okay, I have this gaping flaw, right? For example, like I couldn't sleep. I have to sleep, right? I have to work. I did a job where I was moving my body sometimes 13 hours a day nonstop. But because of my lack of sleep, every time I would close my eyes, I'd see my sister. I needed some way, so I would develop constant working out routines. I started learning meditation. I would learn how to use my breath to regulate my blood pressure, my cortisol levels, it turns out. Later on I studied, and meditation does help lower your cortisol levels. And I would do anything necessary to try to manage one step at a time. It felt like after the accident, I felt like I was constantly drowning. I went from thinking like, wow, man, my life is ahead of me. I think this road is paved open to, I can't breathe. And so then at that point, you just identify, okay, what's one skill? Okay, I need to swim this arm. I need to swim this arm, then this arm. And then you're starting to tread water. So I'm taking one breath at a time. The water's splashing in my face, one breath at a time, splashing in my face. That's what like my 20s was like. And then at 27, I'm like, okay, I'm now kind of doggy paddling, so I'm gonna go to college. I'm gonna finally get my degree at 27. I get there, and due to my gap in education, and also the amount of head hits that I had, not only did I go through that car accident, but I was still training martial arts and boxing and stuff. So I went from not being the sharpest tool in the shed to just being this round ball. So I couldn't read. I could sound out the words, but I was functionally illiterate. I could read it, but I didn't understand what it meant. Couldn't understand no math, I didn't even know what a topic sentence was. So I'm walking up 27 in class, and I had to stay after the program because I didn't get any of the material in class. And this 18-year-old is tutoring me in basic math and English. And it was the most humbling thing ever. But I realized that was the next weakness, was the intellectual ability, my reasoning, cognitive ability. The reality was it was all destroyed. But what am I going to do? Do I give up? No. I didn't have a choice. I had nowhere to go. It was either forward or die. So I said, let's evolve. I'm going to spend as much time as possible in conquering this. So I went back into my mind, I visualized this, I'm going back into the mountains. So I literally, after my first year of college, I wasn't doing like I wanted, so I quit. I stopped seeing my friends, told my parents, hey, just don't call me for about 6 months. And all I did was live in the library, and whether I understood it or not at that time was less relevant. I just wanted to get that A. So within a semester, I was able to start learning how to get straight A's, and I was able to get straight A's my last 2 years. And still, I still wasn't understanding anything. I just didn't stop grinding until I got that A. And then from there I thought, well, what do I do? I said, well, let's continue to work on this weakness. And I knew this reading, writing, lack of comprehension, this inability to understand anything and cognitively work through and have any really real, solid, critical problem-solving skills is going to kill you. So my logic was, okay, let me just pick a profession that forces me to do it, because I'm not going to do it on my own. So I picked law school. And I spent 3 years in school and 1 year out, building my applications up to a school that I liked. And then I did. I got into Emory. That was my dream school at the time. And I thought, oh, okay. Yeah, a lot of the problems that I had was because I didn't have much prestige growing up. I was the non-traditional Asian. Yeah, no, it was true. Even my Asian friends told me, yeah, my mom didn't want me to hang out with you, man. But got there, and then the other weakness was exposed to me, was that I'd never really dealt with my sister. And I had all these physical injuries that I never got fixed because I never had health insurance. So I said, in 1 year, I'm like, well, this is the first time I've had access to this type of insurance, meaning Emory paid 90% of everything. So let's do it. So all I did was, I'm not even going to think about becoming a lawyer. I'm just going to milk this access to care. So by the time I graduated, Emory had paid about $400,000 for treatment. Got my knee fixed, my orbital bone fixed, my eye muscle, they tore it apart, reattached it, got new teeth. So now I'm like, okay, now I'm structurally reestablished. Now what do I do in terms of career? So now the last year of law school, I was like, law ain't for me. I can barely read, man. I'm gonna be a horrible lawyer. So I said, what do I do? I said, okay, I have to earn a lot of, well, at least a decent amount of wealth for me to set it up for future generations, because I didn't really grow up with any of that. So let me take that burden on my shoulders. But what's going to get me that money? Well, I have to at least be incredibly interested in it, or I'm not going to do it long enough. So I centered upon tech. It was the one industry that's lucrative and fun for me. But I didn't have an MBA, and I didn't have an engineering degree, so my in was sales. I'm just going to get my foot in the door and see what happens. And I kept working, kept fighting, kept dancing, kept singing, and went all the way up until I was at the end of my summit program. In my program, there was no rotational. And you just got stuck with one role. And then at the end of the 2 years, you can transition to a new role. So I thought in my heart, all right, man, I have a pretty crazy background story. So almost like I felt it was owed to me. I was guilty of a sense of entitlement myself for expecting, okay, when the new role comes, then whatever the functional rotational program that was in place will give me something. And then I'll be out in the field, and I'll be doing this, and I'll be doing that. I got laid off the month before that transition. And it was a freak set of events, like all the stars that lined improperly. That whole team got laid off. It was a federal team. My manager got laid off 2 weeks after laying me off. So it was just one giant guillotine that you will realize happens in business. Get smart. It is a brutal industry. When it comes down to that dime, that nickel, that penny, and your name is on something, doesn't matter how fancy you are, no matter what you did, it's people, I've seen the dynamic and demographic of our entire office change by 80% the 2 years I was there. So I was sitting on my couch, thinking, Jesus, why is it that when life hits me with punches, it doesn't just hit me, it just hits me with the combo, it's like nonstop, and I'm trying to dodge the whole time, and I'm reminded that's life. Life is chaos. So I better start bobbing and weaving or go pick up an application for Subway or something. And my manager calls me about 4 weeks into my severance package, my layoff. And he calls me and says, hey, Isaac. And I'm like, yeah, what's up, man? Yeah, you ready to roll? And I was like, roll what? And he goes, yeah, so we were able to get a bunch of managers and we fought corporate to get you off the layoff list, which never happens, like 0 chance that happens. So we've done the impossible, we've moved mountains, had the stars aligned in your way, we've got you a job, it's in security, it's never been done before in the North America region, and we want you to be the first hire. I took it, and it's literally changed my life. I am a DDR, but they made me a weird, like, event DDR where I just go to events and I do crazy stuff. My job is to draw brand attention to our booth. So I do everything from, I heard Stevie was rapping, I was just freestyle rapping about security, and it's what it's allowed me to do. It brought me full circle. I get to have my own unique way of inserting myself in my role. So I've now been able to close the gap between the personal and the professional. I'm more authentic in my job day in and day out. And what that does, it makes you happier. And a happy worker, for me, I'm just a more productive worker. So I've made a little montage of what I've been doing since this layoff. I mean, it's a security conference in New Orleans. This is how I prep for events. I treat it like a fight. To San Diego for
And when it explodes, you will know. Because you don't have to think, you'll be ready to go. It's just like smooth. It's just like groove. Every time you think, man, you're ready to move.
And this is our office. I like to So I'm in a position where now I'm in negotiations to move on to the next step. And I had no idea my journey at IBM would be relatively this tumultuous, but for some it's been even more tumultuous. And a lot of people spent their whole careers, giving to IBM and then boom, gone. Those are people that had rocket careers out of nowhere, and you're like, wow, I didn't expect that person to do that. It's just you don't control those variables. So I just focus on me. I focus on what I can control. Every day I try to put as much energy into building and evolving who I am as a human being at my core. And I try to do that as a service to myself, to my family, and to my work. And I know that if I'm an improved, evolved person every quarter, every half, that benefits the team and me being able to be a leader somehow, being able to support the leadership, being able to be a coworker. You ever been around an environment where somebody's really negative or positive? Can you guys feel it? You guys know that depending on the type of vibration that comes into a room, not necessarily literally, but just the energy you feel from somebody, it could dictate that whole mood for the day. So I take that as, okay, so then what, even if we had dealt with this recently in our office, some negative events happened, everybody was in the worst mood ever. So I tell myself, the same stuff I told myself in the mountains, let's focus on the vibration that I can emit. And if the counterbalancing energy is intense in one way, I just have to be more intense. That means I have to go back to my training. That means I have to find my silver linings. And I have to keep building my resilience and know that if I'm enjoying my day-to-day, if I'm my more authentic self every day, it's hard to be really expressing yourself honestly day to day. It's a hard thing. There's so much insecurity, fear, and you have to battle that every day. So I put all my energy there. I try to do that, and so that when I do have an expression eventually, whether it's in my job or doing that weird dolphin dance that I do, or whatever it is, I can have a good time, and that good time transmutes into the people around me. So, I'll leave you with this as, I don't want to do that again, but I did want to, I dedicate my speeches now to my baby sister because I realized that what kept me alive in that hospital was the false knowledge that I had saved her. That's what they told me, you saved her. She's waiting for you to come back and give her a hug. And I realize now what's kept me alive through all the death, all the destruction, all the hunger, all the loneliness, all the travels. I mean, I have even more crazy stories. We can talk about that at the bar sometime. But what's got me through that over time was this knowledge that she died in my stead. And I owe it to her. I know that if she was here and I was still suffering, still sleeping on those floors, still eating dirt, and not wanting to live, she would hurt more than everybody. So what I've done is I used to look at her identity as two separate entities. I fuse those in me. I don't think she's separate from me. I always think she's a part of it. So everything I do, everything I enjoy, she feels. So I feel like I owe it to her. There's the one person that I owe is her. And so I will try and strive to live my absolute best life for her. And there's nothing you can do to me now. I still feel fear. I'm still riddled with insecurities, and I'm a very flawed human being. But I'm way better at conquering those things now. Because all I have to go mentally is go think of her. And whenever I can't go that extra mile. I fail to be centered. And I'm obsessed too externally on things I can't control. I'm not putting in enough work ethic. I don't have a good attitude. And I'm just pissing away my opportunities. And I'm frustrated with everything. I just go back to who fought for me to be on this podium today. And it just snaps me out of it. So now I'm blessed. I just got an eject button. And so if there's anything, I'll leave you with this. Bruce Lee said, take what works, discard what doesn't, and make something uniquely your own. I say the same thing. All the things I said up here, it's just ways that I've tried to conceptualize and organize my weird, crazy life for you. And in any way, those benefit you at all in your journey, I'd be eternally grateful. But I'm not up here like preaching. It's just, this is my life. And all its flaws and vulnerability. Take what works, try it out, doesn't, discard what doesn't, and then keep making something uniquely your own and bring that. And you'll realize that the more authentic that is, the more honest that is, and the more pure that is, it'll make the people around you benefit, and the people that you really love will feel it. So remember, trade your peace, right? Your journey at IBM has just begun. There will be all types of stuff that will happen that you will not expect and you do not plan for. And that's kind of the point. And the better you are, I've heard somebody say this to me, that leadership looks at, you might be technically savvy, but what they really look at is how do you react to pressure? You could be the smartest person, the best background or whatever, but how do you deal with pressure? If we put pressure on you, start squeezing you, how do you react? And that's what character is. True character is shown under that stress and under that pressure. And the way to build that is, again, to train it. So I hope I was a benefit. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you very much. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week.